All right, so I put a link in the chat. I'm going to try something new today, a la Patrick and his interactive slides. It's not exactly poll everywhere, but I put a link, and what you'll get access to is called a class. It's most often used by classroom teachers, so I hope you won't mind. The application is going to call you a student, but this is not so much a student classroom environment, but more just we're trying to be a little bit more interactive today. All right, so I'm going to go. I see 42 people have connected, so if you don't want to join, it's okay. I've just added a couple different things in our slides just to kind of keep it fun and upbeat, and I just wanted to try it out and see how it's going to go. All right, so I'm going to start the class and I'm going to share my slides. Okay, can you guys see my screen? You should see my slides here. Okay,
Yep.
All right, so today is the CDM Workshop Part 1. And really what we're trying to do with these workshops, and workshops might be a little bit of a misnomer for this audience, because usually workshops you think about hands-on activities, really diving deep into a project or a problem. And today and over the next meeting, what we wanted to do was give you guys an idea of the breadth of expertise within the CDM working group. So if you want to join a future workshop, you have an idea of the kinds of questions you can ask, and the kinds of topics we can help you with, and really what we're trying to do here with these workshops, and really be a support system for the community and for you all. And so I already know, I think it was Vishnu said he's new, so welcome. I'm hoping we have some other new folks, as I know some of this content will be repetitive for our OHDSI old hats, but hopefully you'll learn something new as well. All right, so we're going to talk about the journey from data to data. I know often in OHDSI we talk about the journey from data to reliable evidence. And we talk about our reliable evidence a lot because that's really what we're here for. We're here to generate evidence as a community that improves the lives of patients around the world. But within these workshops and within the next 2 days, we really want to focus on the journey from your patient level data in your source system to your patient level data in the common data model. So if you take that line and you stretch it out, and you've got 8 little dots there, we work together in our working group to come up with what are the stops on the journey from your data in your source system to your data in the common data model. And what we came up with is you want to think about your technical considerations for setting up your CDM. You want to have a good handle on your data governance. We also have the White Rabbit and Rabbit in a Hat tools that are very helpful for understanding your native data, as well as then facilitating the structural mapping of your data from source to standard. We've then got Usagi, which is a wonderful vocabulary mapping tool. We've then got a data quality tool, as well as a characterization tool to help you understand how well you've converted your data from source to standard, and then just help you understand your data as a whole. And then Achilles starts to get you to that point where you're benefiting from the open science community and all those million lines of code that Paul was talking about. And then at the end, we had another one, which is technical considerations for studies. So you have your CDM set up, and now you want to be involved in a study, and what do you need to think about from a technical perspective. So today we're going to talk about these first 4 stops on the journey, and then our next meeting next week, we're going to talk about the other 4 steps. All right, so Frank is going to take us through our technical piece. Kristin is going to talk to us about data governance, and then Maxim is going to take us through the tools White Rabbit and Rabbit in a Hat and how those work. Okay, Frank, I hand it off to you.
Thanks, Claire. So I'm here to provide just a few brief comments on technical considerations for getting started on your journey. And to start, you're going to need a relational database. And the OHDSI community provides support for a wide variety of platforms. Members of the community are actively working with most of the database platforms on this list of supported database platforms. The underlying support, or why we say these are supported, is derived through a couple of our packages that provide ways for our tools to connect to and query different relational database platforms. So if you needed a database not on this list, or if you had a particular issue that you were running into, you would look for support from the database connector or SQL render packages. But to get started, you would make a choice of one of these platforms, whatever suits your infrastructure and your technical skill sets that you have available in your organization. There are often a lot of questions that come up around the scaling of your infrastructure. So, how much memory do I need? How many cores? How much disk space? And unfortunately, the topic is a little bit too broad for this conversation. And the truth is, in my typical consultant fashion, that it depends on many different factors that are unique to your environment and data. But that's really the fact here. Uh, the good news is we have all different shapes and sizes of databases and platforms within this community, and you'll find that members across the community are very willing to help you if you're just starting out and need to get a small database up and running, or if you're growing into one of our larger data holders and you need massively distributed parallel processing data environments. We have people in all those states, and so whatever place you are in, there's going to be someone you could work with to understand how to best fit your needs and scale to your growth potential. Okay, next slide. So now that you've selected a database platform, it's time to create the schema for a supported version of the CDM. And we currently recommend all community members use the 5.4 release. Um, the OHDSI community provides a few different R packages that are helpful for getting started, and one of them is the Common Data Model package, in which a single line of code will allow you to create all of your necessary tables. Once those tables exist, you'll then need to load a vocabulary. And so I call it the vocabulary content, because the CDM Common Data Model package will create your tables, but then you need to load your vocabulary tables with concepts, concept relationships, concept ancestors, and all the other fun stuff that will then help you down the road with your ETL. The vocabulary content itself can be obtained by downloading it from Athena, which is an OHDSI website that provides access to the vocabulary files and that you use to populate your vocabulary tables. Okay, and next slide. And so here we see when you're finished with those steps, you'll have a database that resembles this diagram. So you'll see one section there in the center that describes the standardized vocabulary. That is a set of tables that you would have populated with the content, which you got from Athena after creating this overall database with the Common Data Model package on your chosen SQL platform running the 5.4 schema of the Common Data Model. And at this point, you're ready to load up all of your data. But before you load your data, there are some non-technical topics that you should consider.
Okay, before we move on to Kristin, this is the first interactive piece of this presentation. So if you are logged in and you are participating, you should see a blue dot on your screen. My question to you is, how confident are you with your personal CDM technical considerations or your technical setup? So if you just drag your blue dot, I should see a lot of people kind of falling, a lot of people in the green, but a lot of people falling all along the spectrum between super confident or not confident. And that's actually really helpful. That means that in a future workshop that we'll of course be sending you guys information about as those are scheduled, it means that maybe we need to spend some time on additional technical understandings and how to set up your own database. This is super fun, by the way. I wasn't sure if this is going to work, so this is great. Thank you for participating. All right. Now I hand it over to Kristin, and she's going to talk to us about data governance.
So who's excited about governance? Who gets up and is like, ooh, governance, this is my favorite topic. It's you, right? Me too. As it turns out, I published a paper this week about it and I forgot. So let's have a quick tour to talk about governance. So next slide. What is data governance? If this term doesn't mean anything to you, it's just the process that we outline how we organizationally manage and control our data. And it really is important because we want to make sure that we're consistent with how we use our data, that we're trustworthy, that there's no misuse. Simple, right? Next slide. So why does it matter in OMOP? Well, we're person-centric and we are retaining things that some might call personal identified information or protected health information. Now I'm showing my bias that that's like an Americanism. You might call it something else in your home language. And there are many, many ways that your CDM may be treated to uphold local protocols as it relates to protecting the trustworthiness and misuse of that information. Next slide. So what is your responsibility if you are a data holder inside of OHDSI's community? Well, we expect you to know, understand, and follow your local governance processes. And if you don't know what they are, well, let's talk today about some ideas of how to set some up. Next slide. Now, it's worth saying there are different rules depending on where you sit. So if you're in Europe, you probably know GDPR. If you're in the US, you probably know HIPAA and how to misspell it. And there's lots of rules around this. And I just flash these as exemplars. There are many others depending on where you sit. So just know that different sites have different rules and to be prepared when you're interacting with sites too, that these are things they have to navigate. Next slide. So where do privacy concerns tend to show up, or where does governance start to care? We care about things like your date of birth. We care about where you are physically located, or maybe where your provider is located. We care about the precise dates that you receive a clinical therapy or an event happens to you. We care about what we might call sensitive conditions, psychological or mentally related clinical conditions. We care about when you die and how you die. I know that sounds kind of silly. How, if I'm dead, what does that mean? Well, we care about protecting you and your privacy even when you are passed. And so if you think about these areas, next slide, there's a few places they come up in your CDM. So your date fields, we see these across many of our domains. We have date and date time. There's also this place in many of our domains, the star is obviously the name of, and we have lots of source values that we can preserve both the provenance of how we got information, but we also have the opportunity to put things in there that might be sensitive. And anytime we have strings, which can come up in a number of domains, we might have problems because there might be more information in there than we realize. So person table is obviously quite sensitive and we are a person-centric model. Location can be very sensitive as well. There are zip codes in there. There are addresses. There are counties. There's the provider table, observation. And of course, those of you in our Note and Note NLP work group, you guys have obviously been talking a lot about information in that domain. And it's just worth saying that there are lots of places that governance might want you to inspect and interrogate your data as you are using it. So I'm not here to give you all the rules. I'm here to get you aware of where you just might have to slow down and ask questions as you are navigating both the use of your data internally and as you share results. And in the next slide, if you're curious, I actually wrote, how did I end up here today? Well, it turns out in the Docuthon, I wrote an article for Claire that I forgot that I wrote. And then Maxim said, Kristin, you should do this section. It was such a great article. There's a really nice wiki here with some information. And we'll walk you through exactly kind of some of the considerations. There's a lot more detail on the specific areas that I just called out in the last slide. So take a stumble over there. If you have more questions, we can also engage on the forum, but that's really meant to be your beginning kind of double click on some of these areas. And in the next slide, I'm gonna give you a little bit of alphabet soup. So this is my favorite thing, is to just throw terms at people and hope they understand my jargon. So when we talk about alphabet soup governance edition, and if I could, I'd have that Adam Driver, meme, good soup, good soup. There's a lot of good terms in here. You're going to hear about your institutional review board. That's really inside your organization who's making sure you are ethically conducting research. You might call it different things. If you're a commercial entity, you might not have one. You might have some other type of oversight committee. You have, yes, the great meme. You have your data use agreements, your data transfer agreements, your data use requests. These all sound like I'm repeating the word data many times. These are different constructs around both accessing data for analysis. In some rare cases, you might be in a situation where you are transferring and in a program where you're allowed to do that. So that would be a very specific type of agreement. Data use requests can be quite broad and really be related to how you are analytically interacting with your data. The good news is that in OHDSI, we fully specify our protocols before we go out and do anything. So we are well positioned to file DURs and be very specific about what information we're not touching and what we're not doing. And of course, you might hear things like city training. And I didn't write out city because I don't know anyone that writes city out. It's like CVS. You just kind of say it. It's a training protocol, especially for US-based projects. A lot of groups mandate you do modules. It's a thing that you'll do periodically. There are definitely equivalents in other research consortia. You might hear the word data steward, and that really refers to the person who is interacting with the data and is generally empowered to have a governance kind of position and understand the processes and protocols. So when you're running network studies, be nice to your data stewards. They're doing the best they can to navigate the rules they're given, and they have really different rule books depending on what we're up to. So just something to note. You might hear things like LDS or limited data set, and you might also hear terms like synthetic data set. Limited data set is a term that really talks about the protection and the use of very, very sensitive information in the protocols for using it. And then synthetic data is kind of its almost polar opposite, where they are actually kind of creating a almost real likeness data set. And we have colleagues in the OHDSI community who have done some exceptional work on this. Our Tufts colleagues are just actually, I think their weekly win is they just got certified on a synthetic data set. So each of these things have lots of processes underneath them. There's lots of knowledge that we can share if you're curious. But today I just want you to walk away with enough to be dangerous. So you've had a dose of soup. It was a small nom, there's more to learn there. And the last thing, next slide, I want to leave you with is just this reminder that we have two types of data querying. And I stole this from our friends at N3C. I think it's really nice. We mostly in OHDSI do the left, where we are federated querying. We are sending out packages and sending back results. There are some examples in our community of centralized analytics where we actually send data to a secure place. This happens in all of us. It happens in N3C. And that's just a different world. So just a reminder that there are many flavors of governance. There are many flavors of data querying. There are many acronyms that we're just going to hope you remember. And when in doubt, ask for help. So our next slide, I think this is my last slide. Don't be that guy. Governance is not one size fits all. If you know who your local IRB and privacy office are, work with them when you're running studies to make sure as you're using your CDM, you're in compliance. And when in doubt, ask for help before you break the rules. And you can call me up. I might not know all your rules, but I can certainly direct you to folks who do. And first one to figure it out tells the rest, right? So I see there are some questions in the chat I'll try to respond to as we go, but I'm going to turn it back to Claire.
All right. We've got another pulse check. So you should see on your screen now a question, and it gives you the opportunity to answer. So the question is, it is the responsibility of the data holder to know, understand, and follow their specific data governance rules. True or false? Okay. Where are we falling? All right, good. Most of us are falling in the correct answer, which is true. It is your responsibility, as Kristin went through, to understand your own data governance rules, because as she said, we are a federated network. And so you're responsible for making sure you are following your own data use agreements and privacy rules. All right. Okay, it's working. Thank you. Going great. All right, so now we're going to move to Maxim, and he's going to share with us a little bit about, okay, now you've got your tech stack stood up, you understand how you can use your data. How do you now start understanding what you have in your source data and then start mapping it to the CDM?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. So there are two tools in the OHDSI tool stack that will help you with that. White Rabbit to understand your data and RabbitNet to design the transformation to the home of CDM. Next slide. Short reminder where we are in the ETL process. Claire already gave a nice overview. This is the point where data experts and CDM experts come together to design the ETL. Next slide. And one of the tools that can help is White Rabbit. This is a quick overview of the functionalities. So White Rabbit will create a scan report of your data. It profiles your source data, creates an overview of tables, fields, and values in your source data system, and gives record counts and statistics on your data. It supports both delimited text, but also SAS files, and 8 different relational database management systems that it can connect to. A lesser known feature is that it has a fake data generator, which based on the scan report can create fake tables with random values in each column. Next slide. So why should you create a scan report? Well, it helps understanding the structure of your source data. And this is the, so it provides all the tables, all the fields, and what are the most occurring values in each field. More importantly, maybe, this scan report, this Excel file, is also the input for Rabbit in a head. And that is where it really shines. Next slide. You can skip this one. Yeah, next. So what is Rabbit in a head? Rabbit in a head can facilitate a mapping workshop where you sit together with source data experts, CDM experts, the clinical experts to design the mapping to the home of CDM. It provides an overview of source tables from the White Rabbit scan report and already has built in multiple CDM definitions. This also supports already CDM version 5.4. And you can also enter your custom target model. I had a GIF here, but that is not playing apparently. That's fine. Then
I'm sorry, Maxime.
Interpretive dance, go for it.
It's a lot of text now, but that's fine. The output of RabbitNet is a document that where you document the transformation rules. And you do this by linking the table to table and field to field. And I hope the next slide is not an empty slide, because that just is a picture of hopefully moving Rabbit in a head. I was afraid so. So what should be showing here is how you can explore.
There, Maxime, I've got it open on my PowerPoint so that we can go this way.
And maybe there
we go, because I thought this might happen.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to do a live demo, so this is a bit of a replacement of that. So you can explore the scan report basically in Rabbit in a head. So you see all the source tables on the left and all the fields in this on the right. And it was moving, it stopped for some reason. Could you try to reload once, Claire? Yeah, because the nice thing is you can then, within the table, look at the fields and see all the values in those fields. This is the same information as the scan report, but it's a nice way to interactively walk through the source structure and see what values are in each field. And then with that knowledge, you can start designing your transformation rules in the same application. Next slide. So yeah, that's the creation of the mapping specification. So linking source tables to target tables, source fields to target fields, and then documenting per transformation rule also what the logic is. So should you filter something? Should you transform? So for instance here, for a birth date, you should only take the year of birth to populate populate that field in the CDM. Next slide. And then the output of Rabbit and Hat is a document, could be either a Word document, could be an HTML or a Markdown document, where all these rules are documented, and this can be handed towards the ETL developers. Next slide. Also important, this is a living document, and ideally published somewhere, at least within your organization, that people can see what rules you have implemented to populate your OMOP CDM. Next slide. Oh, by the way, that's an example of the ETL CDM builder, which is very nicely accessible as a GitHub.io page. Then a comment on the stem table. So the vocabulary drives the data movement. So in some cases, not the code from a condition table will actually not be a condition occurrence. For instance, the code for an abnormal weight gain, which might be in a condition table in the source, is actually an observation code, an observation concept. So it should end up in the observation table in OMOP. In Rabbit in the Hat, you can use the stem table, which is a domain agnostic intermediate, to map your source to, and then Rabbit in the Hat provides the mappings from the stem table to the different OMOP domains. You still have to implement it as well in your ETL, in your transformation scripts. But this is an easy way to document that you let the vocabulary drive the movement of the data, the domain, target domain of the data. And the stem table basically contains all the fields that you will find in any of these OMOP domains. Next slide. So in such a workshop where you define your mappings, you not only want to concentrate on that, but also just get general information on your database, technical specifications, as also Frank went through, the data provenance, use cases, why are you transforming the data to the OMP CDM, how often should it be refreshed, are there any data restrictions, governance issues, and who's the main contact. In general, get to know the source data. Then on the next slide, I have a final remark and a bit of an outlook for next week. So Rabbit and Hat is only for creating structural mapping, a structural mapping specification, and documenting mapping decisions. It's about which source fields are the input for which OMOP CDM fields. The mapping of values to standard concepts, the semantic mapping, is a separate mapping process. And more on the semantic mapping will be next week, where we go into Usagi. I think Melanie will do that. Then the last slide, take away all this information on the whole ETL process can also be found in the Book of Odyssey, which has it's a nice chapter on that, explaining every step in this journey. With that, I want to hand it back to you, Claire.
Okay, so thank you for dealing with some of our technical issues here, but I think Maxim did a really great job, and thank you for taking us through that, because as you guys can see, there's a lot of different pieces involved getting to your standardized data. So there might be a lot of different pain points for each person, and so what we're trying to do here is kind of show you all the different things that are encompassed in that journey, and then how we in the CDM working group, as well as there's some folks on the education working group and Melanie's working group, who we're all here to try to help us get to the same place so we can generate that all important evidence that we're driving towards. So I have one more interactive slide, though I'm less enamored with this tool now that I know it doesn't work with GIFs very well. Okay, so I had one side, it should be popping up on your side now, and it was really for questions, for you to type some questions here if you had them. I was concerned we wouldn't have time, so I thought if we were able to type questions, kind of like Patrick's poll everywhere, we could keep these and make sure we address them either next time or at an upcoming CDM workshop. So while people type in the chat, is there anybody that wanted to just shout out their question? Okay. The favorite OHDSI ETL tool. Oh, they're all so fun. They're all so great. I think what Maxim has done with Rabbit in a Hat has been fantastic. He's taken over, him and his team have taken over developing Rabbit in a Hat, and I think it is just a phenomenal tool now. If you haven't used it, especially my favorite part is when you pull in your scan report into Rabbit in a Hat, and you don't have to keep flipping back and forth and querying your data. You can just see everything from your scan report. Okay. Question here. Okay. Support for Spanish vocabulary. We actually have Jose was on the call, and Kristin, I know you're active in the Latin America chapter. Are you guys working on Spanish vocabulary?
Yes, I was trying to get my N right on my text. Yeah, Jose is trying to tackle the many dialects of Spanish that may be of interest to research. And if you are interested, we can add you. I don't know, you're anonymous, so it's a little hard to know who you are, but happy to direct you to there. And if you have a preference, and especially let's say you actually mean Catalan, we also have that covered. So yeah, and I see Erica nodding too. She also has some friends on the other side of the pond.
Okay, so another question, can we share ETL design documents to learn from each other? Absolutely. We really encourage that. So we have a couple groups who do share them. It is really helpful, especially because many of us, if we license data, a lot of us license the same data. So it can be helpful to have ETL documents for some popular data sources available. So we can't always share our code, but we can certainly share our documents. And so we really encourage the community to do so. Sam said common ETL mistakes new groups make. Yeah, and I think there are some overcomplications that people get themselves into. And actually over my kind of evolution as an ETL owner, I find that my ETLs have become simpler over time. So I definitely suggest to keep it simple. Andrew, you have your hand up?
Yeah, the ETL organization. I think there was a while back an interest in kind of collating and having a central place where ETL code that could be shared was put in an organized form. And I was just asking, I'm interested in where we are and if there are milestones for kind of completing that work. I was bringing it up on the oncology call earlier today and didn't know the current state of it, but I think it's an important activity that I hope we move forward on. So if anybody knows where we are with that I was asking about that.
Yeah, so I can share. We actually do have a repository. It is currently empty because we got, myself and a couple other collaborators got together to create the requirements, because what we thought would be important is if you want to contribute to an ETL repository, we need to make sure that you have certain items in your ETL so that it can be useful to someone else. So we got that far, and then I will say it is my fault. I was supposed to push it over the finish line, and we slowed down as we were releasing 5.4. So if there's more interest in the community, we could actually absolutely bring that back up, and we can bring it back to the CDM working group and make sure we get that available to folks. So thank you, Andrew. All right. I saw another hand. I'm not quite sure who. Oh, Nitin. Yes.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a quick question on those economic tables like pair plan period and cost and the new episode table. Are those available? Like available in the Rabbit in the Hat? Like, so just want to check whether those are also available.
Yeah, all tables from version 5.4 are available in Rabbit in a Hat. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So since we have 5 minutes left, I did want to share an anecdote with you. So I was listening to it's gonna tie in, I promise. I was listening to a story this morning about the 1871 Polaris expedition. I don't even know if you guys have heard this before, but it was really interesting to me because there's this group of explorers who are trying to get to the North Pole for the first time. On their way north, they got stranded on an iceberg and they unloaded cargo and 19 people onto an iceberg. Over the night, the iceberg drifted away from the ship, and these people were stranded on an iceberg for 6 months. Nobody died, they lived, and then they were picked up off the coast of Labrador. I found this super fascinating and super interesting. And what it made me think about was why we are actually doing these CDM workshops this year. We have so many newcomers to the community, we have so many new collaborators, and we have a huge opportunity with Darwin EU to really change the face of observational health and how we are impacting people's health and everyday well-being. But we can't do that if we are on an iceberg. If some people are drifting out to sea and we don't know, or we can't get to you, we can't all be working together. So please don't let yourself get stranded for 6 months or longer. We are here to help you. And the reason we went through some of this today and next week is so just to give you an idea of all those things we can help you with. And we really want to be there for you so that we can all be on the same ship. Or all on the same iceberg, however you want to think about it. And it did make me think of March of the CDM because we talked about penguins, Kristin. So really interesting story. Please look it up if you're into that kind of thing. But I just really thought it played into what we were doing here today. So thank you for indulging me. And that's it.
All right, Claire, thank you so much for leading this, and thank you to Frank and Kristin and Maxim for this great workshop. We will certainly post this recording later on our community calls page and on Teams. Remember, this is just part one of a great two-part workshop where Claire will have to come up with another story about people who survived, centuries ago, or at least just another great workshop. So we'll see what happens. But that will be next week. Again, the slides, somebody mentioned the slides. We do post the slides and the recordings from each session on our community calls page and in Teams. So you will have access to those probably by the end of this afternoon. So thank you again to everybody for joining. And thank you to Paul for your presentation on the dashboard early. And we will see you all next week. Have a great day. Have a great week.
Thank you.